I do want to invite you to keep pondering that question, to answer clearly for yourself, exactly, no matter what you think the heart's desire should be, try to see if you can find out what yours really is, because there's a difference between, with our desire is supposed to be that we want people to be liberated. But then where are we really with that? And then the other question, we're not going to have a third breakout session, but if we had, I was going to ask you to talk about what are you willing to do to make that heart's desire a reality? What are you willing to do to make your heart's desire become a reality? So if your heart's desire is to make sure that we live, that we practice the baptismal covenant, what's your role in helping to make that happen? And are you willing to step up to that plate or not? And these are questions that you can ponder for yourself. Another piece of that question is, what am I willing to give up for the sake of liberation? Because it could be that there's some things we do need to let go of. And I think that when we approach this way, with asking ourselves these questions and knowing that each person has to answer for himself or herself. So I can't answer for anybody. And I won't be caught trying to say, well, you got to give up this, and this, because those are the things that I have come to understand myself to need to give up. And they may not be at all the things that are hanging you up. You might be getting hung up by 5 other things that didn't make my list. So you have to kind of hold on to yourself and interrogate yourself. Have you ever just knew there was something you were supposed to do? You knew that person needed a ride to the grocery store and you really needed to be the one to volunteer to take them, but you really didn't want to do it. Have you ever had that experience of you knew somewhere in your psyche, in your soul, you understood, I need to say yes to that, but I don't really want to. But then finally you talk yourself into it. And then when you do, you discover they already got a ride, or that the situation's been answered. Sometimes God's got a good sense of humor, and sometimes God just wants you to finally get willing to do it. I was laughing about that with somebody the other day, that they were willing to do something, but they didn't even really have to go ahead and do it. So sometimes that struggle of, these are the things in front of me and I just am holding on to them. And when you let go of it, you discover that that's all you needed to do was let it go. You worried yourself to death because it was going to be such a big sacrifice. And then it turns out not to be a sacrifice at all. That the real challenge was that your heart needed to change. That was what the real work was. The real work was not whether I was willing to take somebody to the grocery store, take that person to the grocery store. The real work was I willing to let myself be inconvenienced? That was the real question. And as soon as I finally said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Yes, it's not convenient. I'm busy, blah, blah, blah. Then I don't have to do it, because I just needed to turn my head in my heart in another direction. Because God is always after our hearts being getting in the right place. Because if your heart's in the right place, your behavior will get fixed. It really will. Your behavior will, it starts with intentionality. So I wanted to spend a little time in this last bit of time we have, talking about next steps and going forward and thinking about, you've been here all day. We've been here talking about all this. You're already doing many different kinds of things in your diocese and in your particular places. But no matter how much we do, there's always plenty more to do. We do have to know what our limits are, and we have to try to learn how to live with peace and contentment in the midst of this challenging situation, because you can't do everything and you're not going to fix most of it, but we have to work as if we think we can. You know, we have to work as if we think it's up to us to get it all fixed, understanding that we can work as hard and as long as we can, and things won't be fixed at the end of our lives. Isn't that a challenging paradox? You know, we want to fix it and we think we can, and we need to think we can. I love that prayer that talks about having the foolishness to try, you know, to believe we can make a difference, the foolishness to believe we can make a difference. I want to change that word from foolishness to imagination. Having the imagination. There's a theologian at VTS that's written a book that's titled Holy Imagination. I love that image so much, because I think that's what that my ancestors had, and oppressed ancestors, the native indigenous people, being run off their land and put on reservations and being the victims of genocide and all those things that happened to them. And they kept on believing that life could be good. That is holy imagination. To see what nobody else can see when there's no external reason for even seeing what you're seeing. There's no reason to have hope, but you have it anyway. That takes imagination. It also takes courage, not to just fall into despair and have your life taken over by the energy of despair. You know, the despair that just can't believe that things can be better. Because of our faith, that helps us not to fall into that trap, even though there's some days that we get close to it. Because I don't know about you, but I have some days that I could get real close to despair and then realize, wait a minute, I got too close, and let me get myself back on track, because I know that despair is not going to get me anywhere. So and I want you to think about this in terms of yourself, not so much in terms of the diocese, not so much in terms of the parish or the wider church for that matter. When you think about all the stuff we've been talking about today, and the work that you're already engaging, and the work that you know that needs to be engaged, what do you think about in terms of yourself personally? What is it that you need and want to do to help make your heart's desire come up into reality as an individual person? And it could be something as simple as, you know, changing your attitude about something. It could be something as simple as becoming a better neighbor. I mean, they're just the list is endless, but individually, what is the thing, the one thing? And it doesn't have to be some great big thing that's going to take a whole bunch of energy. It can be a small thing that then opens up the reservoir, opens up at least the door that leads to the reservoir of new energy to imagine new ways to be about this work. So does that make sense to you, that to think about this that way, to think about what's my next step that I can take this afternoon or in the morning or next week or next month, but it's my step. It doesn't have anything to do with the bishop, with the priest, with the deacons. You know, that lovely song about standing in the need of prayer. It's not my brother, my sister, all that whole long group of people. It's me. Well, this is an it's me question. You know, what is it that I can do? What is it that I will do? And I want you to think about it in terms of can and will, that not only you could do it, but that you will do it because you feel called to do it. And if you can't think of something sitting here in the next 10 or 15 minutes, again, I want to just ask you to put that in your list of things that you're taking away from this day, that you will think about that you honestly will think about it, and that you will diligently seek to hear what the real answer is for yourself and not just kind of blow it off. Because a lot of I hear so much from people across the church about we know we need to do something, but we don't know what to do. I don't think that it's that big of a mystery. I think that people aren't listening well. And I think that a lot of what we're being told to do, we don't want to do. And so we just discount it and say we don't know what to do. Sometimes it's just maybe being a better, more hospitable person in the grocery store. Sometimes it may be just, I heard this lovely story from one of our priests the other day. She had a car wreck, and she had a young boy who was underage. I mean, he was old enough to drive, had a driver's license, but he I think he might have been 17, hit her. He was going too fast, and he was so freaked out about it. She took that opportunity to just step up to the pastoral plate, and she was much more concerned about him and his absolute just hysteria because he had hit her and all that. And then his mom came to the scene, and it just was turning into a nightmare. And the police officer wasn't that helpful. And her story about how she just became Jesus in the midst of that was just so phenomenal. The loving, kind responses she made to the parent and to the boy, and actually even to the police officer who was ugly to her because she's a Latina woman, and he treated her. He was quite ugly in his response to her, and her response back in that whole situation was loving kindness the whole time. And as we were listening to her tell the story, and she said, the police officer yelled and screamed at her, told her she was lying about how the accident had happened. And then when he went and watched it on the camera, he saw she had told him exactly the truth. And he came back with a completely different attitude. But the point I'm trying to make here is that here was a situation where she would have been within her rights just to think about herself. And instead, she spent 99.5% of her time thinking about the other people. And that makes a difference in the world. So I want to encourage you to think about this way. If you think about this big system, big pot of energy, and our behaviors contribute to that pot in either making the pot larger and better or reducing it. So if you have a big negative pot, every time we do something positive and good, the negative pot dwindles, gets smaller. And the positive pot gets bigger because we're contributing this better, newer, energizing energy into the pot. So what is your contribution going to be to the energy pot? The energy of trying to make the world this place where we actually do try very hard to make the baptismal covenant real by the ways in which we interact with people. What is your personal commitment that you could make? So I don't know, Bishop Sand, what else you want to say. I know there's a little, we're getting close to 2:00, and I want to be always respectful, as you all are being respectful of time, when we say we're going to meet from a time to an end point, then doing both of those things, starting and ending when we said is really important. But I want to just say that if nobody else is wanting to talk about what you will do next, that I'm hoping that uh, that you're thinking about that you will ponder this question very deeply as you go forward. And I want to encourage you to pay attention to your dreams. You know, your nighttime dreams will help you with the discernment of going forward. People that cross your path that may be bringing you messages that you need to hear. God's got all kinds of ways to speak to us, all kinds of ways to speak to us. And we need to pay attention. If something keeps coming up over and over and over, there's probably a message there. There's probably something you need to not discount or just blow off, because there's some reason why you keep running across the same people, or you keep having the same thought over and over. If you find yourself antsy about something, pay attention to that, around this whole issue of race and healing. Pay attention to it, but always be mindful that your energy, the energy that you have to go forward in any direction, it should be a great determinant of what you actually take on to do. There are a lot of really good things to do in the world that I'm not even going to think about trying to do, because they're not mine to do. Our job is to discern what is ours to do, and then we'll have the energy to do it. And part of the reason why people get burnt out and why things get started and then get stopped is because we didn't pay enough attention in the first place about what we were supposed to be doing. And what I can say to you is, I don't know what you are supposed to be doing, but I know that everybody is supposed to be busy. I know that there's work that we're supposed to be doing. Now, I'm not going to be egotistical enough or arrogant enough to try to say, you need to do this, 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 and this. You need to listen carefully, because God is so anxious for us to know what we need to be doing. And we will be told what to do if we pay attention. I believe that from the bottom of my heart. I've seen it reinforced over and over in my own life and in the lives of other people. And I believe it for all of you. And I believe you to be faithful people who want to know what you need to be doing and who want to do it. But I also know that you have to have the energy and the courage to go forward with whatever that work is. So I want to end what I have to say today by reading a little bit of the poem from our teenage poet laureate, because I love this poem from Amanda Gorman, because it just says so much about how we can stand in the world. And it goes like this. I'm just reading a little bit of it because it's a really long poem. But when day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? And we do know about the never-ending shade. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, the sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours. Before we knew it, somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply isn't finished. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. And that's the line I want you to make sure you don't miss. We lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We must first put our differences aside We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We lay down our weapons would be another way to say that, because she's talking about things that we use to fight each other so that we can open our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony to all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Because we will never again sow division. And then the last little piece here. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. Aflame and unafraid, inspired and ready to go. The new day blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, and only if we're brave enough to do it. And one of my favorite poets is David White, whom some of you probably know, and he talks about being a half a shade braver all the time. So I would encourage you, as you think about this question of next steps in terms of making the world better and more the way you want it to be, what does it take for you to be a half a shade braver? A half a shade braver. Such a lovely image. You don't have to go tear down the flagpole or the Confederate statue. That may not be what you need to do today, but you can be a half a shade braver. Someday you may need to tear down the Confederate statue, but that may not be today or tomorrow. So I thank you for your listening hearts and listening ears. And I thank you for your faithful journeys. And I thank you for the work you are already doing. And I thank you for the work that you will continue to do. And I thank you for your faithfulness, because your faithfulness makes it easier for me to be faithful.